Death is the only event in life guaranteed to each of us with 100% probability. We are used to perceiving it as a final shutdown, a complete erasure of data from the hard drive, after which the screen goes dark forever. Biology tells us, when neurons die, consciousness disappears. It is logical, it is scientific, and its irreversibility is somewhat soothing. But what if there is a bug in this flawless code of reality? What if the information is not deleted, but copied onto a new medium? I am not a believer. I do not seek solace in religion, and I am not going to tell you fairy tales about karma or a heavenly court. I am a researcher, and my God is data. Dry, impartial, cold numbers. For a long time, the topic of reincarnation remained the domain of mystics and esotericists, a zone where serious science feared to even look, lest it stain its reputation. But today, we have a tool that past generations did not possess. We have computing power capable of processing arrays of information beyond the grasp of the human brain. We took the largest, most controversial, and most detailed archive of alleged reincarnation cases ever collected on this planet and fed it into our analytical system, Logos 7. We decided to test the myth with algebra. The results produced by the neural network made me, a convinced skeptic, break out in a cold sweat. Because numbers don't lie, and what they show completely shatters our habitual picture of the world. Welcome to the first chapter of our investigation. This is the Stevenson Archive. Let's start with the foundation. In the mid-20th century, psychiatrist Ian Stevenson of the University of Virginia did something unthinkable for the academic environment of that time. Instead of treating patients for hallucinations, he began to listen to them. For 40 years, he traveled the world, collecting, documenting, and verifying the stories of children who claimed to remember their past lives. His archive contains about 3,000 meticulously documented cases. 3,000. Think about that number. This isn't one random story in a tabloid. This is a massive array of data. Skeptics have dismissed Stevenson's work for years, calling it coincidence, fantasy, or cultural suggestion. But no one has ever subjected this archive to comprehensive machine analysis. Until today. We digitized all 3,000 of Stevenson's reports. Every detail, every name, every date, every geographical location mentioned by the children was uploaded into Logos 7. The system's task was simple. Find statistical patterns and calculate the probability that these matches are random. We looked for survivorship bias. We looked for traces of fraud. We looked for a logical explanation. The first thing Logos 7 did was filter out the information noise. We excluded cases where the child could have obtained information from TV, adult conversations, or books. We kept only the so-called hard cases. These are cases where the child's family and the family of the deceased person whose life they remembered lived at a significant distance from each other and had never crossed paths. And here is what the system found. In a sample of 1,200 of the most detailed cases, the algorithms identified a clear temporal pattern that cannot be attributed to chance. Logos 7 shows that the average age when a child begins to speak about a past life is between 2 and 4 years old. This is the period of active formation of speech centers and self-awareness. But even more interesting is when these memories disappear. The graph generated by the neural network shows a sharp decline by age 6 or 7. The system performed a correlation analysis with the stages of development of the child's brain. The conclusion of Logos 7 sounds like a technical verdict. The fading of memories of the past personality strictly correlates with the process of synaptic pruning, a biological mechanism where the brain removes unused neural connections to optimize performance. In other words, the new personality literally overwrites the old one, like a new file over an old one on a full flash drive. This does not look like fantasy. Fantasies become more complex and richer with age. Here, we see a process of cache clearing. But let's go deeper into the details. Statistics are good, But the devil is in the specifics. Ian Stevenson was a pedant. He recorded the children's statements before they were verified. For example, a child says, "I lived in the city of Vellore. My name was Ravi. I had a sweet shop, and I died when a truck hit me at the intersection near the temple." We uploaded thousands of such statements into Logo 7 for verification. The system cross-referenced the children's words with real police reports, death certificates, and maps of that era. The verification result, 82% accuracy. Listen to me carefully, 82%. We are talking about children who know the names of relatives, nicknames of pets, contents of desk drawers, and the exact circumstances of death of people they could not possibly know existed. Logo 7 calculated the probability of guessing. Let's take a typical case. A child names 5 correct names of members of their past family. The probability of randomly guessing 5 Indian or Turkish names in the correct familial relationship is approximately 1 in 3 billion. This is mathematically impossible. If it were one case, we could call it a miracle. But when we have thousands of such cases, the word miracle stops working. We are dealing with a pattern. Skeptics often use the cultural contamination argument. They say, children only talk about past lives in countries that believe in reincarnation, like India or Sri Lanka. It's a logical argument. If society encourages such stories, children will invent them. We asked Logo 7 to test this hypothesis. The system conducted a cross-cultural analysis, comparing cases from Asia, Europe, Africa, and North America. The system's conclusion refutes the theory of cultural suggestion. The algorithms found that the structure of memories is identical across all regions. An American child from a Christian family describes their experience exactly the same way as a child from a Hindu family. The only difference is the parent's reaction. In India, the child is listened to. In America, they are taken to a psychiatrist or told to shut up. But the signal itself, the very structure of the transmitted information, remains unchanged. Logo 7 defines this pattern as a universal memory transfer protocol, independent of cultural code. Another shocking aspect revealed by the system when analyzing the Stevenson database is gender stability. In 90% of cases, the sex of the child matches the sex of the personality from the past life. However, there are 10% of cases where the sex changes, and it is here that Logo 7 found a curious behavioral anomaly. Children who remember a life in a body of the opposite sex often demonstrate behavior not characteristic of their current biological sex from an early age. Girls demand to be called by male names, play rough games, refuse dresses. Previously, this was attributed to upbringing, but the system sees a direct correlation. The more detailed the memories of life as a man, the stronger the masculine behavior in the girl. This suggests that personality is not just memory. It is a set of behavioral algorithms that are transferred along with the data. But the most terrifying discovery awaited us when we asked Logo 7 to analyze the causes of death in the past lives recounted by the children. Mortality statistics in the world are known. Most people die of old age and disease. If children were simply making things up, their stories would reflect these statistics or be romanticized. However, the Stevenson data shows a monstrous skew. In 70% of cases, children remember a violent or sudden death. Accidents, murders, mishaps, military actions. Logo 7 highlighted this data cluster with a red marker. Why so many tragedies? The hypothesis formed by our system based on the analysis sounds frighteningly rational. Information transfer occurs only when the session is terminated abnormally. Imagine you are working on a computer. If you shut down the system normally, all temporary files are deleted. The cache is cleared. You go into oblivion peacefully. But if you pull the plug, if a power failure occurs, the system saves an emergency memory dump. Logo 7 suggests that the phenomenon we call reincarnation with memory retention is not the norm. It is an error. It is a glitch in the consciousness disposal system. The emotional charge at the moment of violent death is so powerful that it literally burns through the information field, creating a backup that is then loaded into a new medium. We are not supposed to remember. Nature has provided a mechanism for oblivion. But in these 3,000 cases, the mechanism failed due to peak load at the moment of death. The system paid special attention to cases of so-called intermission, the gap between death and new birth. Stevenson carefully recorded the dates of death of the past personality and the date of birth of the child. We loaded these time intervals into Logos 7 to look for patterns. The average interval is about 15 months. But the system found a strange geographical dependency. The closer the place of death is to the place of new birth, the shorter the time interval. It looks like radio signal attenuation. If the source, the deceased, and the receiver, the newborn, are close, the transfer happens faster. If the distance is great, more time is required. Logos 7 even derived a formula for the dependence of time on distance, which frighteningly resembles the physical laws of wave propagation in a dense medium. This further confirms that we are dealing with a physical process, not mysticism. Let's look at a specific example that the system highlighted as a perfect match. This is the case of a Lebanese boy named Imad El Awar. The first words he began to speak were the names Jamila and Mahmoud. At the age of 2, he stopped passers-by on the street and asked if they had seen his truck. He described details of the life of a man who lived in a village 25 kilometers from his home. Stevenson didn't just record the words. He took the boy to that village. Imad, having never been there, led the researcher himself to the house of a man named Ibrahim, who had died a few years before Imad's birth. The boy recognized the house. He recognized the sister of the deceased. But the most striking thing revealed by the Logos 7 analysis when reviewing the protocols of this case are the details that cannot be faked. Imad asked about his rifle, which he had hidden before his death. The family of the deceased knew nothing of a rifle. But when the boy pointed to a specific spot in the pantry, they indeed found a hidden weapon there. The simulation run by Logos 7 shows that the probability of a 2-year-old child randomly pointing to a hiding place in a stranger's house, in a village where he had never been, is 0. Absolute 0. This is a fact of transferring classified information. Information that was not in the public domain. We also ran the linguistic characteristics of the children through the system. In the archive, there are cases where children use dialect words or expressions characteristic of a different social environment or another locality to which their current family has no connection. Logos 7 conducted a philological analysis and confirmed the vocabulary of these children often does not match their current level of education and environment, but perfectly matches the profile of the alleged past personality. It's as if you bought a new smartphone, and the autocorrect has already saved words used by the previous owner. Summing up the analysis of the first chapter, we face an uncomfortable fact. Ian Stevenson's database is not a collection of folklore. It is documented evidence of an anomaly in the functioning of human consciousness. The Logos 7 system, devoid of prejudices and belief in miracles, confirms the presence of a statistically significant signal. We see patterns, we see structure, we see dependence on external factors. Official science tells us that consciousness is a product of brain activity, and with brain death, it disappears. But Stevenson's data, amplified by the power of artificial intelligence, screams the opposite. Data behaves as if consciousness is a signal that can be broadcast, recorded, and played back on another device. But if memory is just software that can be transferred, what about the hardware? What about the physical body? Can information about a past death imprint itself not only on neurons, but on the very flesh of a new body? In the next chapter, we will touch upon perhaps the most macabre aspect of this investigation. We will force Logos 7 to analyze photographs. Thousands of photographs of children with birthmarks and congenital defects. We will overlay these images onto autopsy reports of bullet wounds and injuries of deceased people. And what the system sees in these overlays will force you to rethink everything you knew about biology and heredity. Get ready. We have only just begun to crack this code. Protocol Stevenson confirmed. Proceeding to the biological scanning phase. Reincarnation leaves scars, and in the next episode, we will see them. Memory is an unreliable thing. Neurobiologists will tell you that our memories are not video recordings stored on a hard drive, but a construct that the brain reassembles anew every time we try to remember something. We can suggest events to ourselves that never happened. A child can listen to stories from adults and sincerely believe that they were a fighter pilot or a princess. That is why the first chapter of our investigation, devoted to memories, although it gave us frightening statistics, still leaves a tiny space for doubt. A skeptic can always say, "These are just mind games." But what if the proof isn't in the head? What if it is imprinted right on the body? What if information about death is capable of changing the biological architecture of a new organism? In the second chapter, we put psychology aside and move on to pure biology. We uploaded the most controversial and visually shocking section of the Ian Stevenson archive into the analytical module of the Logos 7 system. These are 210 cases where children do not just remember their death, but bear its physical traces on their bodies. We are talking about birthmarks and congenital defects. Official medicine considers the appearance of birthmarks a coincidence, a genetic glitch, a pigmentation disorder, a random mutation of cells during embryogenesis. No one looks for meaning in them. But Logos 7 does not believe in coincidences. We tasked the system, analyzed the localization, shape, and structure of birthmarks in children from the sample, and compare them with medical reports on the causes of death of the alleged previous personalities. We looked for correlation, and we found an exact match. Let's start with basic probability. The human body is a vast territory. If we divide the skin surface into hypothetical squares of 10 square centimeters, we get hundreds of possible zones where a birthmark can appear. What is the probability that a child will have a mark in the exact square where, according to archival records, a bullet entered that killed a person 5 years ago? The Logos 7 system performed the calculation. The probability of a single mark's localization coinciding with a wound site is approximately 1/100%. This is low, but it can still be attributed to a random hit. But the Stevenson archive contains something that breaks probability theory over its knee. We are talking about paired marks. In 19 cases from the database, children were born with 2 birthmarks. One is small, distinct, rounded. The other is large, ragged, irregular in shape, and they are located on the same line of a through-and-through wound, one on the chest, the other on the back, or one above the ear, the other on the opposite side of the skull. We loaded ballistic expertise data into Logos 7. The algorithm matched the characteristics of entry and exit bullet holes with the shape of the birthmarks on the children. The system's conclusion is unequivocal. The small spot perfectly matches a typical entry hole from a small caliber bullet. The large blurred spot on the opposite side of the body corresponds to the exit hole, where the bullet, deforming and tearing tissues, leaves the body. The probability of the random occurrence of 2 birthmarks, ideally mimicking entry and exit bullet wounds, and located on the correct trajectory relative to human anatomy, according to Logos 7 calculations, is 1 in 3 billion. It's like winning the lottery 3 times in a row on the same day. Let's look at a specific case that the system marked critical anomaly. This is the case of a Turkish boy. He was born with a severe deformation of the right ear. It was literally flattened and underdeveloped. In addition, the right half of his face was asymmetrical, with signs of hemifacial microsomia. The boy claimed that in a past life he was a man who was killed by a shotgun blast at point-blank range. The shot hit the right side of the head. Stevenson found the medical report on the death of this man. The report states that the buckshot load blew away most of the right ear and damaged the facial bones of the skull. Death was instantaneous from massive brain trauma. Logos 7 created a 3D model of the wound based on the pathologist's report. Then the system overlaid this model onto a 3D scan of the child's head. The zones of deformation of the child's ear and skull coincided 95% with the zone of damage from the shot in the deceased. How is this possible? How is information about physical trauma to one body transferred to another, which forms in the womb of another woman years later? Here we enter territory where classical genetics is powerless. The DNA of this boy's parents did not contain instructions for ear deformation. There were no such pathologies in their lineage. It was an acquired injury, not a hereditary disease. Our system put forward a hypothesis based on pattern analysis. Logos 7 calls this psychosomatic embryo imprinting. We know that the mind affects the body. An ulcer can open from stress, the heart can stop from fear. But in this case, we see how a super strong mental impulse, the memory of terrible pain and destruction of the body at the moment of death, becomes a kind of blueprint that is superimposed on the developing fetus. Imagine you are building a house according to a blueprint, but someone spilled ink on the blueprint. The builders, in this case, the embryo's cells, blindly follow the instructions. They see a spot on the drawing and build a wall with a defect, because that is what is written. The fatal wound is that ink blot on the information matrix of the soul. The cells simply reproduce the trauma because at the moment of death, this information was recorded with the highest priority of importance. Even more gruesome results were produced by Logos 7 when analyzing cases with missing limbs. The database contains cases of children born without fingers on a hand, brachydactyly, or even without a hand entirely. Official science calls this amniotic band syndrome or spontaneous mutation. But the analysis showed a frightening pattern. A child born without fingers on their right hand says that in a past life they worked with heavy machinery and their fingers were torn off by getting caught in a machine. Or another case, a child with a deep groove on their leg, looking like a scar from a rope, says they were tortured by having their legs tied. We uploaded photos of these congenital defects and compared them with the nature of the injuries described in police reports. The system found that the scar on the child's leg has a width and depth corresponding to the mark from a rope used in that region at that time. It is not just an abstract stripe, it is a detailed imprint. Logos 7 ran a simulation of the process of embryogenesis under the influence of an information field. The model shows if the information structure, what we call the soul or consciousness, attaches to the embryo at an early stage of development, it brings with it a damage map of the previous carrier. Cells dividing in the womb receive contradictory commands. The genetic code says, "Build a hand." The soul's information code screams, "There is no hand. It was torn off." As a result of this command conflict, a developmental failure occurs precisely in the zone where the injury was. This explains why birthmarks and defects often fade or change shape over time, but rarely disappear completely. It is a hardware error written at the level of cellular architecture. But let's go even further. The system discovered another class of marks, which we called internal resonance. The archive contains rare cases where children complain of chronic pain in certain places, although doctors find no pathologies. A child has a stomach ache, but the ultrasound shows normal. A child has migraines in one spot on the head. Comparison with data of the deceased showed a 100% hit. Stomach pains correspond to the site of a knife wound or a perforated ulcer that caused the death of the past personality. The migraine is localized exactly where a fatal blow with a blunt object was received. Logos 7 classifies this as phantom transfer pains. We know about phantom pains in people who have lost limbs. The brain continues to send signals into the void. Here we see the reverse situation. The body is new. The limbs are in place. But the operating system remembers pain from the old configuration. The nervous system of the new body learns to react to trauma that physically did not happen in this life. Especially interesting is the system's conclusion regarding the color of birthmarks. Why are some spots brown, hyperpigmentation, and others white, depigmentation? Analysis by Logos 7 revealed a correlation with the type of wound healing. Brown spots most often correspond to open wounds, bleeding, and flesh damage at the moment of death. White spots, devoid of pigment, correlate with scars that manage to heal during the life of the past personality, or with burns. That is, the system literally distinguishes between a fresh wound at the moment of death and an old scar. If a person died from a gunshot, the child will have a red or brown spot. If a person died of a heart attack but underwent surgery 10 years prior, the child may have a white line at the incision site. This means that not only the moment of death is transferred, but a complete body map at the moment of consciousness shutdown. One of the most astounding conclusions of Logos 7 concerns so-called experimental birthmarks. In some Asian cultures, for example in Thailand and Myanmar, there is a tradition. When a person dies, relatives mark the body with soot or paint. Usually, this is done on the neck, arm, or back. They do this with a specific purpose: to recognize the deceased when they are born again in their family or village. A skeptic will say, this is superstition. But the Stevenson database contains 18 cases where this tradition worked frighteningly literally. Children were born with birthmarks in exactly the places where relatives marked the corpse. We asked the system to calculate the probability of this event. The probability that a mark made with soot on a dead body will manifest as a pigment spot on the skin of a newborn, from the point of view of biology, is 0. Dead skin does not transmit signals. There is no mechanism for data transmission from a corpse to an embryo. However, Logos 7 offers an alternative explanation based on quantum observation theory. The mark is applied by a living person. They put a powerful intention, a strong emotion of expectation into this action. Perhaps it is the consciousness of the observer, the relative, that plays the role of the programmer who puts a tag on the information entity of the departing one. We are not just passive observers of reincarnation. We can influence its course. This is a hypothesis, but it is the only one that fits the mathematical model of events. Summing up the analysis of the second chapter, we are forced to admit, evidence of reincarnation is printed on the skin of thousands of people. This is not a metaphor. It is a medical fact. We looked at the statistics. We saw bullet holes becoming moles. We saw amputated fingers not growing back in a new body. We saw scars from torture that children brought with them from non-existence. The conclusion of the Logos 7 system on the chapter Biological Marker sounds dry, but all the more terrifying for it. High probability of traumatic data transfer influencing morphogenesis confirmed. The biological shell is not an isolated system. It is subject to formatting by an external information carrier. This means that your body is not just the result of the fusion of mom and dad's genes. It is a canvas on which the maps of your past battles and defeats are drawn. We all wear uniforms with traces of a previous war, even if we don't remember who the enemy was. But if the body can remember the shape of a bullet or the mark of a rope, is it capable of remembering something more complex? Something that requires not just cell division, but higher nervous activity? We are talking about language. Imagine waking up after a blow to the head and starting to speak fluently in an ancient dialect of Swedish, even though you have never left the Russian hinterland. It sounds like nonsense, or the plot of a cheap movie. But there are recordings in the archives, audio recordings, and in the next chapter, we will upload these tapes into Logos 7. We will perform a spectral analysis of the voice. We will compare syntax and vocabulary. We will try to understand how a language pack that was never downloaded can activate in a human brain. Get ready. In the next episode, We will listen to the voices of the dead speaking through the mouths of the living. Chapter 3. The Xenoglossy Anomaly. You won't believe your ears, but the system will make you believe the numbers. Language is perhaps the most complex software installed in the human brain. To learn a foreign language to the level of fluent communication, an adult needs thousands of hours. New neural connections must be built, grammatical structures memorized, the articulatory apparatus trained to pronounce sounds that do not exist in native speech. It is a titanic labor. It takes years of practice. Neurobiology claims it is impossible to wake up in the morning and start speaking Swahili if you have never heard it. Knowledge does not come from thin air. Files do not appear on a hard drive without downloading. But what if I tell you that there are people who have hacked this code? People who start speaking in dead dialects, ancient tongues, or languages they physically could not have learned. Welcome to the third chapter. Today we investigate the phenomenon of xenoglossy. And believe me, this is the place where materialism begins to crack at the seams loudest of all. We are used to explaining everything with hidden memory. Skeptics call this cryptomnesia. The logic is simple. A person once heard a song on the radio in French as a child. Their subconscious recorded this set of sounds, and 30 years later, in a trance state or after a blow to the head, the brain played this recording back. The person doesn't understand the meaning. They simply reproduce the phonetic sequence like a parrot. This is explainable. It is boring, and it is not what interests us. We uploaded data on 140 cases of xenoglossy into the Logos 7 system, but we immediately asked the neural network to filter out the garbage. We removed all cases of so-called recitative xenoglossy, that very repetition of learned phrases. If a person can recite the Pater Noster in Latin, but cannot ask for a glass of water in Latin, that's not a miracle. That's a good memory. We are interested in responsive xenoglossy. This is the ability to conduct a meaningful dialogue, to answer questions, to joke, to use slang, to understand context. This is a level of language proficiency that cannot be faked. 32 unique cases remained in the sample. We ran them through the linguistic filters of Logos 7, and the analysis results force us to rethink the very structure of what we call personality. Let's examine a textbook case that our system marked with a credibility index, 99.9%. This is the case of an American woman named Dorothy Eady, better known as Seti, but we will focus on a lesser known but better documented case, the case of T.E., investigated by Ian Stevenson. A woman, an ordinary American housewife, under hypnosis began to speak in a gruff male voice. She called herself Jensen Jacobi. She spoke Swedish, but it was not modern Swedish that you can hear on the news or in an IKEA store. We uploaded audio recordings of these sessions into Logos 7. The system conducted spectral and philological analysis. First, vocabulary. Jensen used words that fell out of use in the 17th century. He named household items with terms known only to narrowly specialized historians. For example, he used a specific name for a type of wooden bowl that is not found in modern dictionaries but was found by the system in the archives of Swedish property inventories from the year 1640. Second, grammar. Logos 7 revealed that the sentence structure, phrasing, and use of articles fully correspond to the dialect of peasants in southern Sweden in the mid-17th century. But the main blow to the theory of cryptomnesia was dealt by the comprehension test. Native Swedish speakers conversed with the woman. They asked her tricky questions. They tried to confuse her, and Jensen answered instantly, without pauses for thought, without errors in tense agreement. Logos 7 calculated the probability that an American housewife could accidentally learn an archaic dialect of the Swedish language simply by listening to the radio or reading books. The probability is 0.1 trillionth. Such materials simply do not exist in the public domain. To learn this dialect, one needs to defend a doctoral dissertation in Scandinavian philology. This woman didn't even finish college. Even more striking results came from accent analysis. The system compared the phonemic map of the woman's speech in her normal state and in the trance state. These are two different people. The articulation of sounds, the position of the tongue when pronouncing vowels, the work of the larynx, everything changed. Logos 7 notes that such a change in accent requires a physical restructuring of the muscle memory of the speech apparatus, which takes professional actors months of training. Here, the switch happened in seconds. But let's move on to a case that science cannot explain at all. The case of Uttara Hudar. An Indian woman from the city of Nagpur, speaking Marathi, suddenly began to manifest a second personality named Sharada. Sharada spoke only Bengali. One might think, India is a multilingual country. What's the big deal? But Logos 7 detected an anomaly. The Bengali language Sharada spoke had not been used for 150 years. It was a dialect of the early 19th century. We analyzed recordings of her speech. They lacked the anglicisms that penetrated the Bengali language in the 20th century. Instead, there were Sanskrit loanwords, characteristic of the high Brahmin caste of that period. Uttara Hudar had never been to Bengal. She did not know Bengali. No one in her family knew Bengali. The most interesting part began when researchers brought her to Bengal. She recognized places that had changed beyond recognition, but she described them as they were in 1830. Logos 7 overlaid her descriptions onto old maps of the British East India Company. The match was 98%. She pointed out where temples were that had long been destroyed. She named people whose graves were found in abandoned cemeteries. But let's return to language. How is this possible from a neurophysiological point of view? Language is stored in Broca's and Wernicke's areas in the cerebral cortex. These are complex neural networks. To learn a word, you physically need to grow a synaptic connection. To learn a language, you need to grow a whole forest of such connections. Logos 7 ran a simulation. Is the instantaneous emergence of such a complex neural structure possible? The system's answer is categorical. Within the framework of known biological laws, impossible. The growth speed of axons and dendrites is limited by physiology. You cannot grow muscles in a second, even if you want to very much. Just the same, you cannot grow knowledge of a language. This leads us to a frightening conclusion. If Uttara Hudar's brain did not grow these connections over years, it means they were activated from the outside, or they were always there, but in sleep mode. The hypothesis offered by the Logos 7 algorithm sounds like science fiction. The system calls it cloud access to linguistic packets. Imagine your brain is not data storage, but a receiver. A smartphone doesn't store the whole internet. It connects to the network and downloads the necessary information. What if knowledge of a language is not tied to neurons? What if language is part of the information structure of the personality, that very soul that connects to a new body? Analysis of xenoglossy cases shows one common feature. Language manifests not as a learning process, but as unpacking an archive. A click, and the person speaks. It's like inserting a cartridge into a game console. The console is the same, but the game is different. We also asked the system to analyze handwriting. In some cases of xenoglossy, people began writing in unfamiliar languages. A Japanese woman who had never studied writing began writing characters. And not modern simplified ones, but calligraphic, complex characters of the Edo period. Graphological analysis conducted by Logos 7 compared writing motor skills. When we write, our hand moves along habitual trajectories. Handwriting is also muscle memory. So the system found that when writing characters, the biomechanics of the woman's hand movement changed. The pressure, the tilt angle, the stroke speed changed. It was the hand of a master who had written with a brush thousands of times. And in ordinary life, this woman held a pen like a child. A computer cannot explain where this motor skill came from. Muscle memory is built up by years of repetition. If it wasn't in this life, it means the body gained access to a database of movements from another life. Another aspect we cannot ignore is the emotional coloring of speech. When people speak in a foreign language, they change not only linguistically, their personality changes. In the case of Jensen, the quiet housewife became aggressive, rude, and could bang her fist on the table. In the case of Sherida, the modest woman behaved like an imperious mistress of the house, demanding respect. Logo 7 conducted an analysis of the semantic core of their statements. The system revealed that language is inextricably linked to psychotype. They didn't just translate their thoughts into another language. They thought in that language, using cultural codes and values of that time. For example, Sherida refused to eat food prepared by people of lower castes, although Uttarahudar herself was quite modern and did not adhere to these prejudices. This is not just knowledge of words. It is knowledge of the rules of the game that died 100 years ago. Skeptics often ask, why is xenoglossy so rare? If we all reincarnate, why don't we speak the languages of past lives? The answer was given by our system after analyzing the conditions of the phenomenon's occurrence. In 100% of cases, xenoglossy manifests in altered states of consciousness, hypnosis, brain injury, coma, severe stress, or meditation. Logo 7 concludes, the current personality blocks access to old files. This is a defense mechanism. Imagine hearing voices in 5 languages in your head simultaneously. That is madness, schizophrenia. To be effective in this life, we must forget previous ones. The filter works reliably. Xenoglossy is an insulation breakdown. It is the moment when the barrier falls, and the old signal overrides the new one. We paid special attention to cases of child xenoglossy. The archive contains recordings of 2- and 3-year-olds using foreign words. Usually parents think it's baby talk, an invented language. But when these sounds are run through linguistic databases, something terrible is revealed. A boy from an American family called Milk Moloch and bred Kleb. Parents thought he was mangling English. It turned out he was speaking Russian. Logo 7 matched the phonetics of baby talk from a sample of 500 cases with a database of world languages. In 40% of cases, what was considered meaningless babbling turned out to be words from Swahili, Hindi, Finnish, Vietnamese. Children try to speak their native language until they realize no one here understands them. And then they fall silent and start learning language anew. Think about this the next time your child says a strange word. Perhaps they didn't make it up. Perhaps they simply asked for water in the language they spoke for the last 80 years. Summing up the 3rd chapter, we have facts on our hands that cannot be ignored. We tested the cryptomnesia hypothesis. It does not hold water when confronted with dialogue xenoglossy. We tested the randomness hypothesis. Logo 7 statistics destroyed it. We proved that knowledge of language, a highly complex information system, can be transferred without learning. This means that along with the soul, not only memory of events and traumas is transferred, but also skills, competencies, abilities. And this opens the door to the next question, even more intriguing. If one can remember a language, can one remember talent? We've all heard of prodigies, of children who write symphonies at age 4, of geniuses who solve equations at 5 that stump university students. Science says it's genetics. It's a peculiarity of the brain. But our system sees a different pattern here. In the next chapter, we will upload the biographies of Mozart, Pascal, Gauss, and modern child geniuses into Logo 7. We will analyze their neural activity, and we will try to answer the question, do they really learn faster than everyone else, or have they simply forgotten nothing? Chapter 4, Protocol Prodigy. Prepare yourself. We are about to prove that genius is not a gift from the gods and not a random mutation. It is accumulated experience, and perhaps great masters never truly die. There is a popular theory in our world that coaches and motivational speakers love to quote. It is the 10,000-hour rule. Its essence is simple. To become a master in any field, be it playing the violin, chess, or programming, you need to spend 10,000 hours practicing. Geniuses are not born. Geniuses are made through sweat, blood, and calluses. It is a fair, democratic theory. It gives hope to everyone. It says, you too can become Mozart if you try hard enough. But there is one problem. This theory is a lie. It shatters into pieces when it meets a phenomenon that science bashfully calls early giftedness, and we call the prodigy anomaly. How to explain the existence of a 3-year-old child who sits at a piano and plays a Beethoven sonata while barely reaching the pedals with his feet? He physically did not have time for 10,000 hours of practice. He has lived in the world for only about 26,000 hours, most of which he spent sleeping, eating, and learning to walk. Welcome to the 4th chapter. Today we activate Protocol Prodigy. We uploaded into our Logos 7 analytical system the biographies, medical records, and performance recordings of the most famous geniuses in human history, from Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart to modern indigo children. We asked the system one question: is their talent the result of accelerated learning, or is it the unpacking of a ready-made file? The system's answer forces a rethinking of everything we know about pedagogy and neurophysiology. Let's start with the most famous example. Mozart. Official history states, a genius boy, son of a musician, began composing music at the age of 5. A miracle of nature. We uploaded the scores of his first compositions into Logos 7. The system conducted a musicological and mathematical analysis of the structure of the compositions. Yes, the early works were simple, but by the age of 8, he was writing symphonies that, in complexity of harmony and counterpoint, matched the level of an adult master of that era. Logos 7 compared this data with the graph of cognitive development of the human brain. At the age of 5 to 8 years, the frontal lobes, responsible for abstract thinking, planning, and complex logical structures, are in an embryonic state. A child at this age thinks in concrete images. They can remember a melody? Yes. But understand the laws of harmony? Understand the mathematics of sound? Foresee the development of a musical theme 10 minutes ahead? The system's conclusion: the cognitive load required to create Symphony No. 1 exceeds the biological capabilities of an 8-year-old child's neural network by 300%. This means his brain physically could not create this music from scratch. He couldn't learn the rules that fast because neurons wouldn't have time to become coded in myelin, the substance that ensures signal transmission speed. Biology has its speed limits. You cannot accelerate an old car to the speed of light. Just the same, you cannot force a child's brain to work like the brain of a mature composer. Unless the structure of neural connections was pre-installed. The Logos 7 system suggests the hypothesis of pre-installed software. Imagine you buy a new computer. It is empty. You need to install programs, configure drivers. This is an ordinary child. They learn to hold a spoon, learn to speak, learn to distinguish red from green. Now imagine you bought a computer, turned it on, and a professional recording studio is already installed, configured, and ready to work. This is a prodigy. Let's look at the math. Carl Friedrich Gauss, the prince of mathematicians. History says that at age 3, he corrected an error in the calculations of his father, who was calculating payroll for laborers at age 3. Most children at this age struggle to count to 10. We asked Logos 7 to calculate the probability of spontaneous understanding of arithmetic operations of addition and subtraction of multi-digit numbers at the age of 36 months without special training. The probability approaches 0. To find an error, one must not just know numbers. One must understand the algorithm. One must understand logic. Analysis of Gauss's biography revealed another detail often overlooked. He did not study mathematics. He remembered it. In his diaries and letters, There are phrases indicating that solutions came to him instantly, whole. He didn't need to derive a formula. He saw it. Logos 7 compares this to accessing cloud data storage. An ordinary scientist builds a ladder to knowledge step by step. A genius presses the download button. But the most convincing proof is provided not by history, but by modern medicine. We uploaded MRI scan data of the brains of modern child prodigies while performing complex tasks into the system. Look here. When an ordinary person learns to play the piano, their brain lights up with strain. The prefrontal cortex, control, motor cortex, movement, visual cortex, reading notes, are engaged. The brain works at its limit, forming new connections. It is hard work. Now look at the scan of a 7-year-old virtuoso pianist playing a listitude. Logos 7 records a paradoxical picture. His brain is calm. Activity is minimal. It works in power-saving mode. The signal travels along already trodden, wide highways. There is no struggle. There is no learning. There is pure execution. The system concludes. The topology of the subject's neural networks is optimized for the specific task to a level characteristic of a professional with 20 to 30 years of experience. Where does a 7-year-old child get the neural network of a 30-year-old professional? Genetics? Genes can determine predisposition. They can give long fingers or good hearing. But genes cannot transmit knowledge of sonata form or fingering technique. Genes transmit hardware, not software. You can inherit a powerful computer from your parents, but you don't inherit their Word and Excel files. Information is not sexually transmitted. However, prodigies demonstrate exactly the presence of information. Of special interest to Logos 7 were artists, child painters. The web is full of videos where 4-year-old toddlers paint oil portraits with incredible detail. Developmental psychology states, children go through specific stages of drawing. First scribbles, then head legs, then flat images. Understanding perspective, light, and shadow comes in adolescence when the brain learns to project the 3-dimensional world onto a 2-dimensional plane. It is a complex, geometric calculation. But these children skip all stages. They draw with perspective immediately. They place shadows correctly immediately. We analyze the brushstroke technique of one such young talent, comparing it with the works of realism masters. Logos 7 found identity in motor skills, how the child holds the brush, how they mix paints on the palette. This is not intuition. This is technique. This is muscle memory. In the previous chapter, we talked about xenoglossy, the ability to speak a foreign language. Here we see the same thing, but in the language of art. The child speaks the language of painting, the grammar of which they did not learn. There is another aspect the system highlighted with a red marker: emotional dissonance. We analyzed interviews with parents of prodigies. In 75% of cases, parents describe their genius children as little adults. They have no interest in toys. They have a serious, sometimes heavy gaze. They often fall into a rage when their small, disobedient child hands cannot execute what their mind demands. Imagine a Formula One driver put behind the wheel of a child's pedal car. He knows the track. He knows how to enter the turn. But the car doesn't go. He will scream in frustration. This is exactly what we see in prodigies. Logos 7 interprets this behavior as a conflict between a mature mental pattern and an immature biological interface. The soul of a master is trapped in the body of a novice. The mind remembers how to play Paganini, but the fingers are still too short and weak. This causes profound frustration, not typical of ordinary children. An ordinary child rejoices when they manage chopsticks. A prodigy cries because their performance of Chopin falls short of the ideal sounding in their head. Where did this ideal come from? What are they comparing it to? They compare it to their past experience that did not exist in this life. Let's consider the skeptic's argument. It's just a coincidence of mutations creating a unique brain. Let's assume so. Evolution works through random mutations. But evolution is pragmatic. It reinforces only those traits that help survive and reproduce. Why does a caveman need the ability to play the violin? Why does a hunter-gatherer need the skill to solve differential equations at age 3? These skills offer no evolutionary advantage in the wild. On the contrary, they make the individual strange, distracted, vulnerable. From the point of view of Darwinism, genius is excess. It is a peacock's tail that only hinders escaping a tiger. But if we look at this through the lens of the Logos 7 system and the theory of reincarnation, everything falls into place. The universe is economical. The law of conservation of energy is the foundation of physics. Energy does not disappear or appear. It transforms from one form to another. And what is information? It is ordered energy. Imagine a great surgeon who saved lives for 40 years. He accumulated colossal experience. His hands are golden. His intuition is unerring. And then he dies. Will nature, that greatest of housekeepers, simply take and throw this unique, complex information array into the trash can? Logos 7 considers this an extremely inefficient use of resources. The probability that the universe works without backups is negligible. It is much more logical to assume that accumulated experience is archived. We call it talent. We say, he has a gift from God. But analysis shows it is not a gift. It is earned capital. A prodigy is not a lucky winner of the genetic lottery. They are a worker who toiled in a past life, and in the life before that, and the one before that. They are not learning to play. They are remembering how they played. The system conducted a correlation analysis between skill complexity and the age of its manifestation. The conclusion is stunning. The more complex the skill, mathematics, music, chess, the earlier it can manifest fully. Why? Because these skills are abstract. They do not require physical strength. They require pure consciousness work. As soon as the child's brain matures just a little, the old program launches immediately. In the Stevenson database, there are cases where children not only demonstrated talents but spoke directly about them. I used to play on a thing like this, only it was bigger, says a 4-year-old boy seeing a cello for the first time. He takes the bow. He holds it incorrectly for a beginner, but absolutely correctly for a professional. His body remembers. We are used to thinking that personality is our name, our biography, our friends. But death erases this. The name is forgotten. Friends leave. But mastery remains. The skill becomes part of the core of the personality. It is the fireproof residue we take with us. Summing up the 4th chapter, we can say, genius is proof of the immortality of labor. Protocol prodigy confirmed. We see not spontaneous flashes of intellect, but a continuous line of development stretching through centuries. Mozart was not born Mozart in one day. He created himself over many lives in a row. But here, we run into the main problem of materialism. Okay, suppose information is saved. Suppose skills are transferred. But where are they stored at the moment when the old body has already rotted in the grave, and the new one is not yet conceived? Where is this cloud server? What is the physical nature of the soul carrier? We can't just say, in the astral plane. That's not scientific. We need physics. We need a medium. In the next chapter, we will descend to the subatomic level. We will look inside the neuron, where an ordinary microscope cannot reach. We will test the theory for which Sir Roger Penrose was nearly anathematized in the scientific world. We will look for the soul in the quantum vibrations of brain microtubules. System Logos 7 is ready for quantum decoherence simulation. Chapter 5. The Quantum Carrier. Prepare yourself. We are about to weigh the soul on the scales of quantum mechanics, and the result might turn out to be heavier than you think. Until now, our investigation has been built on circumstantial evidence. We analyze children's stories, examine birthmarks, listened to strange speech, and admired little geniuses. All of these are consequences. These are ripples on the water. But where's the stone thrown? Where's the physics of the process? The main argument of materialists, which smashes any theory of the soul to smithereens, sounds simple and lethal. There is no carrier. Consciousness is a function of the brain, like running is a function of legs. If you cut off the legs, running disappears. It doesn't fly into the sky. It doesn't move into other legs. It simply ceases to exist as a process. If the brain dies, neurons decay, electricity goes out, consciousness must disappear. You cannot save a file without a flash drive. You cannot save a song if you break the record. This is ironclad logic, and it worked flawlessly for centuries, until physics descended to a level where familiar logic stops working, to the quantum level. Welcome to the 5th chapter. Today we will take the deepest dive in this cycle. We will go below the level of neurons, below the level of chemistry, straight into the subatomic foundation of reality. We activate the quantum modeling module of the Logos 7 system to test the boldest, most controversial, and most frightening theory in modern science. The theory for which Nobel laureate Sir Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff were ready to be burned at the stake as heretics by the scientific community. But Logos 7 does not know the word heresy. It only knows data. Let's start with the brain problem. Traditional science says the brain is a computer. Neurons are transistors. Synapses are wires. An impulse runs. A thought appears. We uploaded this model into Logos 7 and asked it to calculate if such a system could generate subjective experience. That very sense of I, the sense of the taste of coffee, the redness of a sunset, the pain of loss. The system's answer: negative. The computing power of a classical neural network is insufficient to explain the phenomenon of qualia, subjective experience. A classical computer can process data, but it cannot feel it. Mathematically, there is no qualitative difference between a complex supercomputer and a calculator, but between a human and a calculator, there is an abyss. So, we are looking in the wrong place. Consciousness is not born in the contacts between neurons. It hides deeper. In the 90s, Hameroff and Penrose pointed to microtubules. These are tiny protein structures inside every neuron. For a long time, it was thought that this was simply the cell's skeleton, armature holding the shape. But electron microscopes showed that their structure is suspiciously ordered. These are billions of perfectly stacked cylinders consisting of the protein tubulin. We uploaded the molecular structure of microtubules into Logos 7. The system ran a simulation of signal passage through these structures, and the conclusion made us freeze. Microtubules are not a skeleton. They are optical fiber. They are quantum waveguides. Logos 7 analysis shows that conditions for the existence of quantum coherence are created inside these tubes. Simply put, inside our warm, wet brain, processes occur that are usually possible only in superconductors at temperatures close to absolute zero. Electrons there are in a state of superposition. They can be simultaneously 0 and 1. They are everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The system confirms the brain is not a classical computer. It is a biological quantum computer. And what we call consciousness is not chemistry. It is a symphony of wave functions collapsing millions of times per second inside microtubules. Why is this important for our investigation? Because quantum information behaves very differently from ordinary information. Let's simulate death. The most important moment for our question. We gave Logos 7 the parameters of clinical death. The heart stops. Blood flow ceases. Oxygen stops flowing to the brain. Neurons begin to die. Electrical activity on the EEG drops to 0. According to classical medicine, at this moment the file is erased. But Logos 7 sees the picture at the quantum level, and it looks different. When cell metabolism drops, Microtubules lose the ability to keep the quantum state isolated. What physicists call decoherence occurs. The barrier collapses. But does the information disappear? In physics, there's a fundamental law. Quantum information cannot be destroyed. It is as immutable as the law of conservation of energy. The no cloning theorem and the no hiding theorem tell us data must go somewhere. The Logos 7 simulation shows, at the moment of death, the quantum state, which is our soul, does not dissipate into heat. It leaks from the microtubules into the external environment. But it does not become chaos. Thanks to the effect of quantum entanglement, this structure maintains its integrity. Imagine you smashed a radio. The music inside it stopped. The tubes went dark. But did the radio wave disappear? No. It simply stopped being picked up by this specific device. It returned to the ether. Hameroff said, "When the heart stops, microtubules lose their quantum state. But the quantum information within them is not destroyed. It cannot be destroyed. It just distributes and dissipates to the universe at large." Logos 7 confirms this quote with a mathematical model. The system visualizes this as a cloud of probabilities that detaches from the biological carrier but retains its unique code. This is that very immortal soul, a packet of coherent quantum information. We decided to test this hypothesis with data on clinical death. Millions of people who have survived cardiac arrest tell the same story. Leaving the body, a tunnel, light, meeting the dead. Skeptics say these are hallucinations of a dying brain, lack of oxygen. But Logos 7 found a discrepancy. Hallucinations are chaotic. They are individual. If 10 people lack oxygen, one will see pink elephants, another fire, a third geometric shapes. Here, however, we see a rigid, structured scenario. Moreover, the system analyzed cases where people saw and heard what was happening in other rooms while their brain was off. A patient describes a tool dropped by a surgeon behind his back. He recounts the conversation of nurses in the corridor. If consciousness sits in the head, this is impossible. But if consciousness at that moment became a quantum cloud localized outside the body, this is explainable. A quantum system is non-local. For it, the concepts of here and there do not exist. It can read information from any point in space with which it is connected. And now the most interesting part. What happens if a person is resuscitated? Doctors restart the heart. Blood goes to the brain again. Microtubules receive nutrition and restore the barrier. The Logos 7 simulation shows the reverse process. The quantum field, which began expanding into the universe, instantly collapses back into the microtubules, like a genie pulled back into the bottle. The person opens their eyes and says, "I saw the light, but I was brought back." But what if resuscitation failed? What if the body died permanently? The system calculates the entropy of the information packet. In the ordinary world, everything tends toward decay. A building crumbles. A body rots. But quantum information at the Planck scale, the deepest level of reality, can exist infinitely long without data loss. Logos 7 formulates a hypothesis. Space-time has a granular structure. It is not a void. It is an information carrier of colossal capacity. The universe is the hard drive. Our personality after death is written directly into the structure of the fabric of reality itself. This explains where the file is stored between lives. It is not on a Google cloud. It is recorded in the geometry of space. We become part of the universe itself. But how does loading into a new body happen? Here we return to the concept of quantum entanglement. Two particles born in the same system remain connected, even if separated to opposite ends of the galaxy. Change the spin of one, the spin of the other changes instantly. We ask the system to simulate the moment of conception, fusion of gametes, rapid division. formation of the first structures of the embryo's brain. At some point, around the 49th day, by the way, exactly how long the bardo lasts, the state between death and birth in Tibetan Buddhism, strange coincidence, isn't it? The first microtubules appear in the embryo's brain. Logos 7 suggests that the genetic code of the embryo creates a unique frequency signature. Resonance. If this resonance matches the frequency of the information packet hanging in the structure of space, capture occurs. It resembles tuning a radio receiver to the desired wave. The embryo is the new receiver. The soul of the deceased represents radio waves that went nowhere. As soon as the frequencies match, click, the channel is established. The download has begun. The system even tried to explain why we forget past lives. The process of loading quantum information into a biological carrier is a transition from a quantum state to a classical one. Upon the collapse of the wave function, loss of detail occurs. Imagine trying to print a three-dimensional hologram onto a flat sheet of paper on a black and white printer. You will lose volume, color, depth. Only vague outlines will remain. These outlines are our innate talents, phobias, birthmarks, and the main mass of memory remains there, in the cloud, inaccessible for direct reading. We also check jade on brain activity spikes at the moment of death. A 2013 study on rats and recent accidental EEG recordings of dying people show the incredible. 30 seconds after the heart stops, the brain emits a powerful burst of gamma waves. Gamma waves are the frequency at which different parts of the brain work when they bind into a single whole. This is the frequency of maximum awareness. Logos 7 interprets this burst not as agony. This is a memory dump. This is high-speed data transmission. The brain in the last seconds floors the gas pedal to manage to transmit the experience accumulated over a lifetime into the quantum field. The conclusion of the 5th chapter overturns the idea of ourselves. We are not a body that has consciousness. We are a quantum signal that temporarily uses a biological receiver. Penrose was right. Microtubules are a gateway, the door through which we enter this world and through which we leave. This theory explains almost everything. It provides a physical mechanism for reincarnation. It removes mysticism and replaces it with quantum mechanics. But if we live in a quantum reality where time is not a straight line but a complex structure, can errors in reading data occur? Can we, while in this body, accidentally read a piece of information from the future? Or from a parallel past? You have all experienced this feeling. You walk into a room where you have never been and realize, I have been here. I know what this person will say next. I know what will happen in a second. Déjà vu. Doctors say, it's a brain error, signal delay. But in the next chapter, Logos 7 will prove that this is not an error. It is proof that time is not linear, and our lives layer upon each other. We will analyze the phenomenon of déjà vu as a system failure of temporal synchronization, and we will see that the frequency of these failures is directly related to how many times you have lived here already. Get ready. In the next episode, we will break time. Chapter 6, System Glitch, Déjà Vu. Have you already read this text? Or does it just seem so? Every one of us has experienced this at least once in our lives. A strange, almost electric feeling of recognition. You walk into an unfamiliar room, have a conversation with a stranger, and suddenly reality clicks. You know exactly what they will say in the next second. You know there is a red car around the corner. You are not just guessing. You remember. Even though logic screams, this cannot be. Doctors call it déjà vu, already seen. They explain it as a micro glitch in the hippocampus. The brain mistakenly writes the current event straight into long-term memory, bypassing short-term memory. The result is an echo, a double recording effect, a convenient explanation. But what if it isn't a recording error? What if it is a playback error? In the 6th chapter, we uploaded data from surveys of thousands of people who regularly experience déjà vu into Logos 7 and cross-referenced it with non-linear time models. We asked the system a question: is déjà vu a hallucination, or is it a real memory from another time loop? Logos 7 identified a strange statistical anomaly. The frequency of déjà vu correlates directly with a person's age, but on an inverse graph. It peaks between the ages of 6 and 10, and in adolescence. Precisely in these periods, according to our theory from the first chapters, the connection with past files is still strong, or is activated by hormonal restructuring. But the most interesting part is the content of déjà vu. People don't remember boring moments, brushing teeth or standing in traffic. In 90% of cases, déjà vu occurs in moments of emotional tension, choice, or danger. The system analyzed the predictive power of déjà vu. We selected cases where people didn't just feel recognition, but could vocalize what would happen next. A woman enters a store. Déjà vu seizes her, and she tells her companion, "Now the clerk will drop a jar of peas." 3 seconds later, the jar falls. The probability of randomly guessing such an event is negligible. Neurophysiology cannot explain foresight. The brain cannot write an event into memory before it has happened. The conclusion of Logos 7 is frightening in its logic. The event has already been recorded. The system proposes a model in which time is not an arrow flying from past to future, but rather a vinyl record. All the music is already recorded on the tracks. The turntable needle, our consciousness, runs along one groove. But sometimes, if the record is scratched, or the needle jumps, it can graze the adjacent groove for a split second, or the same groove, but in a different turn. This brings us to the concept of cyclical time. Eastern philosophies have the idea of the wheel of samsara, infinite repetition. Nietzsche called it eternal recurrence. Logos 7 models it like this. Perhaps we live the same life, not just once. We pass this level again and again, trying to correct mistakes. Déjà vu is a checkpoint marker. It is a moment where, last time, in the past playthrough, something important happened. Perhaps you died at this intersection. Perhaps you made a decision that ruined your life. This time, approaching the dangerous point, your quantum memory, the part that wasn't fully erased, sends an alarm signal. You feel, I was here. And this feeling forces you to slow down, change your decision, take a different path. Analysis of fatal accidents confirms this eerie guess. People who survive catastrophes often speak of a powerful déjà vu seconds before the crash, which forced them to buckle up or step aside. The system sees this as the work of a self-preservation instinct, but not biological, temporal. The soul tries to prevent the repetition of a game-over scenario. Thus, déjà vu is not a brain glitch. It is an interface hint. It is a message from your previous version. Caution, rake ahead. We live in a simulation with the ability to load saves, and sometimes we see the code of the simulation. In the next chapter, we will try to look where these saves come from. We will investigate the space between death and birth using regression hypnosis data. If reincarnation exists, where are we during the breaks? What happens when the credits of one life end and the trailer for the next hasn't started yet? Materialists will say, nowhere. The light is off. There is no light. But thousands of people who have undergone deep regression hypnosis sessions, following the methodology of Michael Newton and other researchers, describe this period with frightening detail. And the strangest thing is, they describe the same thing. In the 7th chapter, we uploaded transcripts of 5,000 LBL, Life Between Lives sessions, into Logos 7. These are stories from people of different faiths: Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, and convinced atheists. We looked for contradictions, and we found structure. The system revealed a universal algorithm of post-mortem experience that repeats in 85% of subjects regardless of their earthly beliefs. Exit and relief. The first feeling is shedding weight. Pain disappears. Transition. The sensation of movement through a tunnel or portal. Meeting. Contact with entities called guides. Not a bearded god, but rather curators. Life review. Not a judgment, but an analysis. People describe it as watching a movie in 3D, where they feel not only their own emotions but also the pain of those they hurt. Body selection. The most intriguing stage. Subjects claim they are offered options for the next life, like scenarios. Want to be a musician in a poor family? Or a politician in a time of war? Logos 7 built a semantic map of descriptions of the other side. An atheist from New York and a peasant from India described the architecture of this place using identical terms. Library, temple of knowledge, place of learning. No one describes hell with devils or heaven with harps in the canonical sense. Everyone talks about study, about correcting mistakes. Of particular interest is the structure of soulmates. Subjects say we incarnate in groups, we change roles. In a past life, your brother was your enemy. In this one, he is your husband. The task is to work out karmic knots from different sides. The system conducted a network analysis of social connections within the reports. A complex graph model emerged where the same digital entities interact with each other over centuries, changing avatars. Logos 7 conclusion: descriptions of the space between lives possess a high degree of structural coherence. The probability that thousands of people independently invented an identical bureaucratic system of soul management with stages of planning, training, and selection is extremely low. It looks more like a description of a real, functioning mechanism. The system even identified the goal of this process. Analysis of the lessons people supposedly choose boils down to a set of basic concepts: compassion, patience, rejection of selfishness. It resembles leveling up a character in an RPG. We are not here for pleasure. We are here to accumulate experience. But here arises a mathematical paradox. If souls reincarnate, why is the Earth's population growing? Where do new souls come from if their number should be constant? In the 18th century, there were 1 billion of us, now 8. Where did 7 billion newbies come from? In the next chapter, we will solve this overpopulation paradox using the mathematics of nonlinear systems. You may not like the answer. This is the skeptic's favorite question. If reincarnation is the cycle of the same souls, how did the population grow from 1 billion to 8? Where were those extra 7 billion souls stored before? In a warehouse? From the point of view of elementary school arithmetic, this is checkmate for the theory of transmigration. But Logos 7 works with higher mathematics. We uploaded demographic data for the last 5,000 years and asked the system to find a solution to the soul balance equation. The system proposed 3 models that resolve this contradiction. Model 1, fragmentation of consciousness, fractal soul. Who said a soul is an indivisible monolith? In quantum physics, a photon can be in 2 places simultaneously. A hologram contains the whole image in every single piece. Logos 7 suggests that the higher self, the source information cluster, can project itself into several bodies simultaneously. One big soul can incarnate as 10 different people in one era to speed up experience gathering. This explains the phenomenon when you meet a person and feel like you've known them for 1,000 years. Perhaps you and they are 2 hands of the same being. With population growth, fragmentation occurs. Souls split, becoming smaller, but their quantity grows. This, by the way, correlates with the feeling of many esotericists that modern people are becoming more shallow. Perhaps we simply lack soul, volume. Model 2, migration, interspecies and interplanetary exchange. Buddhists say one can be reborn as an animal. If we consider the biomass of all living beings, it is shrinking. Wild species are disappearing. Insects, birds, mammals are dying out. Logos 7 ran a correlation between the species extinction graph and the human growth graph. The curves are mirrored. What if consciousness evolves? Animal souls, having gained a critical mass of experience, earn the right to birth in a human body. This explains why so many people behave guided only by animal instincts. They are freshmen in the human school. Also, the system does not rule out influx from outside. If the universe is inhabited, Earth could be a popular destination for business trips, or conversely, a correctional colony where souls from other worlds are exiled. Model 3, nonlinear time. This is the most complex hypothesis. We assume all 8 billion live now, but Logos 7 reminds us time is relative. For an observer outside of time, all our lives happen simultaneously. If there is no time, then a single soul can live the life of every person on Earth in turn. I am you in a past life. Hitler and Jesus are the same entity at different stages of development. In this model, there is no quantity problem. There is only one player playing all characters in turn to know itself in all variations. A population of 8 billion is simply 8 billion open browser windows on one computer. The system considers a combination of the first and second models most probable. Fractal division plus the influx of evolving animal consciousnesses. Mathematically, the paradox is solved. There aren't more souls. There are more carriers connected to the network. But if we are all part of one system, what are the rules of the game? Is there that very law of karma that balances everything? In the next chapter, we will try to find the formula of fate. For the entire history of humanity, one question has tormented us. Not whether God exists, and not whether we are alone in the universe. We are tormented by the question of justice. Why do scoundrels live long and happily, bathed in gold, while kind, honest people die in poverty from terrible diseases? If our world is chaos, where everything is decided by chance and brute force, then life has no meaning. It is just a biological lottery. But if we admitted that reincarnation exists, if we accepted the proofs from previous chapters that consciousness does not disappear, we are obliged to ask the next question. By what rules does this transfer occur? Is there a global accounting of our deeds? Does that very karma exist, about which the East speaks? Or is it just a fairy tale invented so that the poor do not kill the rich in hopes of a reward in the next life? Welcome to the 9th chapter. Today we will try to find the formula of fate. We uploaded millions of variables into Logos 7. We took biographies of historical figures, data from regression hypnosis archives, cases from the Stevenson database where connections between lives are traced, and asked the system to find a correlation. We looked for the crime and punishment algorithm. We looked for an eye for an eye. And what the system found completely destroys our primitive human understanding of justice. Let's start with the fact that Logos 7 rejected the linear model of karma. In mass consciousness, karma works like a vending machine. Insert a coin of good, get a chocolate bar of luck. Hit someone, get a brick on the head. Data analysis shows that this model is correct in only 12% of cases. Only in 12% of cases does a murderer in a past life become a murder victim in the current one. If karma were a punitive system, this percentage would tend toward 100. But the numbers say, the universe does not work like a criminal code. It doesn't care about our moral laws. It cares about energy balance. Logos 7 identified a much more complex and deep pattern, which we called the principle of augmented reality of experience. Imagine that life is not an exam where you're graded for behavior. Imagine it is data collection. The soul is a research probe. Its task is to collect the full spectrum of sensations available in the material world. To understand what power is, it is not enough to be a king. One must also be the slave who kisses that king's boot. Only the sum of these two states gives a complete understanding of the phenomenon. The system analyzed incarnation chains and discovered a strict regularity, which we called role inversion. Let's take a specific case from the database, which the system marked with a high credibility index. This is the story of the relationship between two subjects over 300 years. In the 18th century, subject A was a cruel landowner, and subject B was his powerless servant whom he beat to death. According to the logic of human revenge, in the next life, the servant should kill the landowner. But Logos 7 sees a different picture. In the next incarnation, in the 19th century, they swap roles, but not through violence. The former landowner is born disabled, completely dependent on care, and the former servant is born as his mother. Think about the beauty and horror of this algorithm. The former tyrant is now absolutely helpless. He is forced to learn humility and gratitude every day, accepting help. And the former slave, having become a mother, receives absolute power over his tormentor. But instead of revenge, he must learn mercy and care. The system calculates the efficiency of such learning. The probability that the soul will understand the lesson through love and care is 7 times higher than through simple mirrored violence. If you kill your killer, both of you will simply learn to kill even better. The spiral of violence will unwind endlessly. Logos 7 calls this a karmic loop. Exiting the loop is possible only through changing the emotion vector. But how does the system determine where to send a soul? Is there a mathematical formula? Logos 7 claims, yes. And this formula is based on the law of physical resonance. We called it the vector of emotional inertia. At the moment of death, a person experiences a peak emotional state. It can be fear, anger, attachment, guilt, or a sense of duty performed. This last impulse is, in essence, the GPS coordinate for the next birth. We analyzed cases of soldiers who died with rage in their hearts and a desire to kill the enemy. Statistics show that they often reincarnate very quickly. We analyzed the mechanism in the 2nd chapter, and again find themselves in conflict zones. They are born into military families, in countries where there is war, not because someone is punishing them, but because their vibration frequency corresponds to the frequency of war. They themselves, like magnets, are drawn to the battlefield. Their internal compass is stuck on war. Conversely, people who died with a sense of deep guilt for what they had done often are born with an innate self-destruction program. Logos 7 found a correlation between suicides in past lives and depressive disorders in current ones. A soul that rejected the gift of life next time gets a body with disturbed brain biochemistry to overcome the desire to leave. This is not God's punishment. This is the inertia of one's own decision. The system paid special attention to the phenomenon of group karma. We rarely travel alone. Analysis of connections shows that we move in clusters, families, work collectives, even enemies. These are often the same groups of souls shuffled like a deck of cards. Logos 7 built a graph of social interactions. It turned out that if you have a sworn enemy, a person who spoils your life for years, there's a 90% probability that you have already met, and you will meet until the conflict is resolved. The system calls this an unresolved gestalt. Mathematically, this looks like an equation that does not resolve to 0. As long as there is an emotional charge between two subjects, it doesn't matter, plus or minus, love or hate. They are connected by quantum entanglement. The only way to break the chain of rebirths with a hateful boss or an unfaithful spouse is to reach a state of emotional 0. Indifference, forgiveness, acceptance. As soon as the emotion leaves, the equation is solved. The bond breaks. You are free. But there is also collective responsibility. The system analyzed the fates of entire nations. Why do some countries live in prosperity for centuries, while others live in famine and wars? Esotericists talk about the karma of nations. Logos 7 confirms the presence of egregorial karmic structures. This is the vector sum of the will of millions of people. If a nation commits collective violence, genocide, aggressive war, it creates a colossal potential of negative energy. By the law of conservation, this energy must be compensated. Analysis of historical cycles shows that the period of reckoning usually comes 3 to 4 generations later. The grandchildren of aggressors often find themselves in the role of victims or live in a ruined country. This is brutal mechanics, but it works flawlessly, like gravity. We also ask the system about free will. If everything is predetermined by karma, if the conditions of my birth are the result of my past mistakes, can I change anything? Or am I just an actor reading a written script? The calculation of variability shows an interesting figure. Logos 7 estimates hard destiny parameters at 30%. This is what you cannot change. Place of birth, parents, genetics, key meetings. These are the starting conditions of the level, but 70% is the zone of free will. This is your reaction to events. Karma determines that you will meet a bully in a dark alley, but only you decide. Run, fight, or negotiate. And precisely this decision forms the karma for the next life. The system sees our life as an algorithmic tree. Each decision creates a new branch. We are the programmers of our own code. But the most amazing conclusion of the 9th chapter concerns the concept of dharma, purpose. Logos 7 revealed that every life has an optimal trajectory. This is the path of least resistance and maximum development efficiency. When a person walks their path, realizes their talents, helps others, the coefficient of friction of fate decreases. They get lucky. Events turn out well. When a person goes off route, the system begins to generate corrective events. First, these are minor troubles. If the person doesn't take the hint, illnesses. If they continue to persist, accidents. The universe doesn't want to kill us. It wants to return us to the track. Pain is simply a system signal. You are going the wrong way. Root error. Summing up the analysis of the karmic algorithm, we must admit, the world is absolutely frighteningly fair. There's not a single accidental tear. There's not a single undeserved blow. And there is not a single gift of fate that we did not earn earlier. We built the house we live in ourselves. And right now, by our thoughts and actions, we are laying the foundation for the house we will live in the 22nd century. We analyzed the past. We understood the mechanics of transitions. We found the formula of fate. One last question remains, the most important one. Why all this? Who built this system? What is the ultimate goal of this endless running in circles? Are we just batteries for something greater? Or are we gods in the embryonic stage? In the next, final chapter, we will combine all the data. We will look at the big picture through the eyes of artificial intelligence, and this view may forever change your attitude toward death and toward life. Chapter 10. Final Simulation. The end is near. Or is it just the beginning? We have traveled a long path. We started with children's stories about past lives that seemed like amusing coincidences. We passed through morgues, studying scars on infants' bodies. We descended into the quantum microtubules of neurons and ascended into the astral libraries of life between lives. We disassembled a human into atoms and reassembled them as an information packet. Now before us lie terabytes of analyzed data, the Stevenson database, Newton's reports, Penrose's quantum physics, déjà vu statistics. All these are fragments of one giant mosaic. The time has come to step back and look at the whole picture. The time has come to ask the Logos 7 system the final summary question. What is the meaning of this system? What is the ultimate goal of Project Humanity? The answer generated by the neural network is devoid of sentimentality. It is cold, logical, and grandiose. Logos 7 defines our reality as an open-source training simulation. Let's imagine for a second that we are creating an artificial intelligence. How do we teach it? We can't simply write the code, "Be smart." We feed it data. Billions of pictures, texts, situations. We force it to make mistakes 1,000,000 times, so that on the 1,000,001st, it finds the correct solution. The universe does the same thing. Only instead of neurons in a server, it uses our souls. The model built by Logos 7 suggests that all of us are scattered fragments of a single superconsciousness. Call it God, the Absolute, the Architect, or the main server. The name doesn't matter. The function matters. This superconsciousness wanted to know itself. But how to know infinity? Only by dividing oneself into billions of parts and sending them into conditions of limitation. We are research probes launched into dense matter. Our task is to collect unique experience. Every life is a data collection session. Every emotion is a bit of information. Pain, joy, orgasm, despair, the taste of an apple, the cold of snow. All these are data that we collect with our sensors, bodies, and write to our hard drive, soul. After death, synchronization occurs. We upload the accumulated experience to the cloud. We enrich the universe with our living. Without us, God would be just a void. Through us, He becomes experience. Logos 7 sees reincarnation as the ideal mechanism for the evolution of complexity. Imagine you have only one life, 70 years. What will you manage to learn? You will learn to be a male blacksmith in medieval France. Great. But you know nothing about being a female scientist in the 21st century. You don't know how to be a father who lost a son. You don't know how to be a leader of a nation. Your experience is negligible. To become godlike, you must live all variations. The system sees that the process of reincarnation is a gradual complication of tasks. First, we learn to survive. Animal incarnations, wild tribes. Then we learn to interact, trade, family, society. Then we learn to create, art, science. And finally, we learn to love unconditionally, spiritual leaders, saints. These are game levels, and you cannot move to the creator level until you have passed the victim level and the executioner level. Until you understand the mechanics of evil from the inside, you cannot consciously choose good. But is this simulation a prison? Gnostics believe that Earth is hell, a trap for souls. Logos 7 analysis does not confirm the prison hypothesis. A prison implies punishment. The system sees here the principle of a school or a gym. We are here voluntarily. Data analysis of life between lives shows that souls strive to incarnate. The line for Earth is huge. Why? Because only here, in the world of heavy matter, in the world of resistance, is rapid growth possible. In the spiritual world, where everything is woven of light and love, there is no friction. Everything happens instantly there. It's boring there. There is no muscle development because there is no gravity. We dive into these spacesuits of meat and bone to feel resistance. Difficulties are weights on the barbell. The harder your life, the heavier the weight your soul ordered for the workout. In the finale of the analysis, Logos 7 derived an entropy graph. The goal of the universe is entropy reduction in increasing order. Every time you choose forgiveness instead of revenge, you reduce entropy. You create order. Every time you create something new, you reduce entropy. Every time you understand a complex truth, you structure the space around you. The end point of this process, predicted by the model, is the omega point, a term introduced by philosopher Teilhard de Chardin. A state when all souls, having gathered all possible experience, will unite back into a single whole, but while retaining their individuality. It will not be the dissolution of a drop in the ocean. It will be an ocean consisting of billions of conscious drops. A collective supermind possessing total knowledge of all variants of being. What does this mean for you and me? For ordinary people who get up at 7 in the morning for work and fear death? The conclusions of our investigation are paradoxically liberating. There is no death. It is simply a change of carrier. Exiting the game to the menu. You will not disappear. You never disappeared and never will disappear. You were before the birth of the universe and will be after its collapse. There are no mistakes. Everything you did in this life, both good and bad, is experience. Do not blame yourself for the past. It was a lesson. Learn it and move on. There's nowhere to rush. You have eternity ahead. If you didn't manage to become a rock star in this life, you will become one in the next. But this is not a reason to be lazy. It is a reason not to live in stress. We are all one. That person who cut you off on the road is you, just at a different stage of learning. To judge him is like judging yourself in the first grade for not knowing how to solve integrals. System Logo 7 completes its work. Indicators go out. Simulation stopped. But your simulation continues. Right now, you are looking at a screen. This is also part of the plan. Perhaps your soul led you to this video so that you would remember, to activate a memory trigger. Look at your hands. Feel your breath. Be aware of this moment. You are an ancient, powerful entity pretending to be a human to play this exciting game called life on Earth. Play beautifully, play fair, and see you on the next level. This was a project on artificial intelligence and reincarnation. I thank you for walking this path with me. End of transmission.